The idea that our nature is inherently inclined toward confrontation is a question that, at first glance, may seem obvious. However, the true origin of human behavior, especially when it comes to aggressive and violent attitudes, does not lie simply in personal characteristics or a determined character, but rather in the context in which we find ourselves. Social psychology offers us an intriguing and disconcerting explanation through one of the most revealing experiments on the nature of conflict. The Robber's Cave experiment, conducted by Muzaffar Sharif in 1954. Conducted at a summer camp, the experiment involved 22 11-year-old boys, all with similar characteristics: white, Protestant, emotionally stable, with good grades, and most importantly, with no prior relationship between them. The initial setting seemed to be a harmonious and harmless environment, but in fact it would become the perfect stage for observing the formation of conflicts between groups. Divided into two teams, unaware of each other's existence, each group was immersed in activities that favored the construction of a collective identity. They swam, played baseball, explored trails, and even created names for their teams, calling themselves Eagles and Rattlesnakes. The boys customized their clothes and created flags, developing a strong sense of belonging and pride in their groups. They formed bonds of friendship, created their own rules, and began to build a hierarchical structure within their microcultures. What seemed like a simple summer camp soon turned into a laboratory of human behavior. When, in an orchestrated manner, the two groups discovered each other's existence and a tournament was announced, the competition went from innocent fun to something much more intense. Baseball, tug-of-war, and treasure hunts became arenas of dispute where, in a few days, taunts increased, and with them, the atmosphere of hostility. The violent actions began with small gestures but soon escalated to invasions of cabins, destruction of belongings, and physical confrontations. This behavior was not rooted in ideological or personal issues, but rather in the simple division between us and them. What seemed like a children's game became a symbolic struggle for supremacy, and within that struggle the line between right and wrong was blurred. For the children, defending their group was a matter of loyalty, not morality. This experiment reveals that as much as we try to believe that our attitudes are determined by character, the truth is that we are deeply shaped by the context in which we find ourselves. When we are faced with the need to defend the group to which we belong, ethics and morals can be replaced by loyalty. And in this scenario, actions that at first glance seem inexplicable or cruel are nothing more than a reflection of the pressure of the environment that surrounds us. The question is, how thin can the line between kindness and cruelty be, depending on the group we choose to defend? Sharif's experiment shows us that often the division between human beings is not determined by who we are, but by the context that creates the circumstances for that division to occur. And even more disturbingly, this context is something we can all experience. After the initial success of the experiment in creating conflict, a new task presented itself to Muzaffar Sharif: how to restore harmony between the now deeply divided groups. The challenge was monumental. The violence and hatred between the boys had intensified, but Sharif was still determined to reverse the effects of the rivalry. His first attempt was simple: to bring the two groups together at mealtimes, believing that shared coexistence could ease tensions. However, what should have been a space for reconciliation turned into a battlefield. Food trays became projectiles, and the dining hall became a place of constant provocation. Attempts to create a more neutral environment, such as movie sessions, failed miserably. The discomfort was palpable. Instead of rapprochement, what emerged was a growing sense of vigilance and mistrust. Sharif realized that simple contact was not enough. That's when he resorted to a bold strategy. He created a common enemy. By cutting off the camp's water supply, the two groups were forced to collaborate to solve the problem. Reluctantly, the boys began to work together. They dug, pushed rocks, and sweated side by side. The next challenge was even more drastic. The truck that brought food broke down, and the boys could only get it working if they cooperated. And it was in that moment of mutual need that something unexpected happened. When the engine finally started, the cry that erupted was not one of anger but of shared victory. The experiment, which lasted only a few weeks, revealed something deeply disturbing. Human morality is vulnerable. When the need to belong takes precedence, ethics can be negotiated and kindness distorted. The desire to be part of a group can be so strong that it alters personal convictions, and values that once seemed immutable become flexible under collective pressure. What was observed in Sharif's experiment is not a phenomenon restricted to the camp environment. It persists to this day. You too choose sides today. You defend those with whom you identify. Unlike the boys in the experiment, you believe you are in control of your choices. But what if, in fact, your morals are not as immutable as you think? What social psychology studies uncomfortably demonstrate is that, in a group, ethics is not a beacon that guides us. On the contrary, it is the first principle to be re-evaluated, to be negotiated. The need to belong, to align with a group, is so powerful that it can distort what we believe to be right. The instinct for acceptance overrides reason, and principles that seemed unshakable can be cast aside. This urgency to integrate is a direct reflection of our evolution. For thousands of years, living on the margins of the group meant death. Natural selection favored those who cooperated, who adjusted, who abided by the rules of the collective. So when you enter a new environment, whether at work, in a circle of friends, or in an online community, your first instinct is not to question what is morally right. The first question, even if unconscious, is about how the group thinks, what it accepts, what it disapproves of. And so you begin to adapt, without realizing it, shaping your behaviors and choices. This adaptation is not a conscious choice. It is rooted in a biological need. Your brain, shaped by thousands of years of social interaction, reacts automatically, adjusting to the norms of the group to ensure your acceptance. This process is invisible but powerful, and continues to influence our decisions to this day. At first, small social adaptations may seem harmless. Laughing at something that bothers you, avoiding a sensitive topic, using popular expressions of the moment. These are micro-adjustments we make to fit in. And the curious thing is that, without realizing it, these adaptations begin to become part of our identity in that specific context. Gradually, you find yourself defending ideas you never questioned, just because everyone around you does the same. This is how belonging gradually erodes morality. It is not a direct attack, but a subtle, almost imperceptible erosion. Morality, which once seemed solid and unchanging, begins to shift, adjusting to the new standards of the group. You continue to believe that you are acting according to your own convictions, that your choices are rational and independent, when in fact you are just molding yourself to the collective. This does not make you weak, but deeply human, and that is precisely where the danger lies. The problem is that if your sense of right and wrong can be easily influenced by the need for acceptance, then even the most ethical people can find themselves becoming complicit in behaviors they once condemned. Not because they have changed their values, but because they have changed groups and do not want to isolate themselves. At that moment, you do not realize it, but you begin to recalibrate your morals not according to universal principles, but according to convenience, acceptance, and even emotional survival. The group doesn't need to tell you directly what to think. It just shows you what is acceptable to think. This is revealed in glances, laughter, silences, and omissions. When someone tells a prejudiced joke and everyone around laughs, The nonverbal message is clear: here, this is acceptable. When someone is criticized for questioning the majority, the message is equally strong: disagreeing has a cost. This influence of the group on your morals is slow but powerful. Without realizing it, your ethical compass begins to deviate from what was right and fair to what is socially acceptable within the group. Now imagine what happens when you find yourself in an ideological bubble where everyone thinks the same way, where any divergence is treated as treason. You begin to see the world through the eyes of the collective, and everything that was once challenging becomes an extension of the group. And most dangerously, you feel morally superior, convinced that the truth is with us and that they are wrong. This sense of moral elevation can justify even the most extreme actions. Because violence, whether symbolic or real, becomes acceptable when directed at the other, those outside the group. And if the group changes its mind, you change too, without realizing it. You then believe that you have always thought that way. What was moral then becomes a matter of loyalty, no longer about what is right, but about who is on your side. That is when your identity begins to disappear. When you join a group with a strong sense of mission or ideology, you begin to lose yourself. Social psychology calls this de-individuation, a process by which personal identity is absorbed by collective identity. It is no longer about who you are, but about what the group demands of you. And that changes everything. In 1971, the Stanford Prison Experiment, conducted by Philip Zimbardo, clearly demonstrated how healthy and balanced individuals can, in a matter of days, become abusers or victims simply by assuming social roles within a closed system. This study illustrates how quickly personal identity can be subjugated by the power of a group, and how vulnerable we are to losing our essence when in contact with collective pressure. The Stanford Prison Experiment, conducted by Philip Zimbardo, brought to light a disturbing phenomenon: how ordinary, young, and balanced people can quickly turn into abusers or victims depending on the role they assume within a closed system. Guards began to humiliate prisoners, and the most disturbing thing? The prisoners began to accept these humiliations as a natural part of who they had now become. None of them were forced. They simply embodied the roles that the group demanded. The group, in essence, becomes a script. You take on the role, the language, the gestures. You start to think in terms of the group's categories, reacting like an organ of a larger body, and most frightening of all, you believe you are being yourself, but in fact you are not. The group not only influences your attitudes, it rewrites your consciousness. This process is insidious, and the most dangerous effect is the outsourcing of responsibility. You act, but you don't feel guilty, because everyone around you acted the same way, because that's what the group believed. What happened in environments such as religious cults, where atrocities were committed in the name of a shared belief, or in armies that committed genocide, reflects this mechanism. And today, with social media, this dynamic takes on a new guise. Virtual lynchings, ideological polarization, destruction of reputations in minutes. Those who click the button, write the cruel comment, or throw the stone feel no guilt because they have molded themselves to the group. They are no longer individuals, they are just another face in the crowd. The most disturbing thing about the Robbers Cave and Stanford Prison Experiments is not just what happened within those scenarios. It is what continues to happen outside them, in our daily lives. Social media, for example, was designed to reinforce these thought bubbles. You start interacting with people who think the same way, creating the illusion that everyone agrees with you. When someone disagrees, even respectfully, the disagreement sounds like an offense, a threat, and that threat needs to be neutralized. The group responds with contempt, laughter, moral lynching. You believe you are defending your values, but often you are just reacting to what the algorithm has taught you to hate. And politicians, strategists, and mass leaders know this. They manipulate the narrative, knowing that anger unites groups. that indignation creates cohesion, and that fear breeds loyalty. They fuel division because the more polarized the world is, the easier it is to keep the masses engaged, distracted, and predictable. The most dangerous thing, however, is that none of this seems dangerous. It seems natural. You share a sarcastic joke about the other side, laugh at a meme that dehumanizes those who think differently, ignore an injustice because it was against them, not us. But this is not just opinion, it is adherence. You are repeating the patterns observed in the Cave of Thieves experiment, now only with Wi-Fi and likes. You are living this experiment now, and there are no scientists watching. There are companies profiting from your reactivity. There are leaders using your sense of belonging as a tool of control. There are entire systems that rely on the fact that you will never stop to reflect. Because if you stop to think, you may realize that you are part of something you did not consciously choose. That you are defending ideas you do not fully understand. That you are hating people you have never really listened to. We like to believe that the world is divided between the good and the bad, between the conscious and the manipulated. But this division is comfortable and false. The truth is more uncomfortable. The real danger does not come from the bad guys. It comes from good people who forget who they are. People like you. People who believe in justice, empathy, freedom. People who want to do the right thing but who, faced with peer pressure and the need for acceptance, begin to silence their doubts, compromise their principles, and adopt narratives that are not their own. The Robbers Cave experiment, the Stanford Prison Experiment, and all the mechanisms of social control we experience today reveal something fundamental. Your integrity is not tested in discourse, it is tested in tension. When your group demands something you know is wrong, when everyone laughs at something that embarrasses you, when defending what is right means standing alone. These are the moments that define who you are, or, if you don't pay attention, who you have ceased to be. What threatens society today is not polarization, it is not extremists, it is not ignorance, it is the silent sum of millions of good people who know something is wrong but prefer to remain silent, who prioritize loyalty to the group over their own conscience, who remain silent when they should confront, who follow the herd and say to themselves, "It's not my problem." But it is. It always has been. History is not made only by those who shout, but also by those who remain silent. And when you don't consciously choose what you stand for, you are already choosing. Only this time, the choice is not yours. It is a reflection of the group.